What you can see is it looks like I've made this great big pavlova. This pavlova is the moulding material. I've already made one that collapsed, so maybe I can show you what happens. Show the stages bit by bit. So here's the carved cylinder, and there's the pavlova that's on top of it. So here's the former mould. You can see that. There's the pavlova that's been pulled off the top. Now what happened was I've poured in a builder's bog that I've mixed up. It's a 2-component. I'll show you that in a minute. Here's the palette. I've mixed up this filler. This turns hard and can be carved. The good thing about this filler is it becomes a sort of plastic which can be carved, but it's hard. It starts quite soft like a putty. Now each of the cylinders has come out of there. So here is that putty. See that? That's one of the cylinders that I've bought. Here's one we prepared earlier. Doesn't look much, does it, up close? But it really works as an engine when you see it in context. And that came out of this mould. The only trouble is the mould's collapsed and it's not the correct shape anymore. I don't know what's happened to it, but it's not the correct shape. So I have to make a new one. And I can't seem to get the V out of it. So what happened was, once I'd taken the mould, I got that out of it. Now at this stage I have 4 of these already, but the mould's broken up. So what I'll do is, these will be arranged like an engine. That'll be the crankcase. That's where the cylinders go down to. Each one of those is a replica of the small wooden engine. See that? Start to get the impression, don't you? Now this is going to slide. Whoops. I think it's really starting to look like something there. I love that. Look at that. But can you see how the mould started to collapse? I'm getting square cylinders here, square edges. But it's going to look good. Now the fuselage, or the body of the aircraft, French words for that stuff. Amazing. Fuselage, aileron, empennage, which means tail. French words, crazy. So the body goes onto it like that. Whoop, there go the pistons. But you get the impression. So I'll show you how to mould one of these in a minute. So here's our pieces. That was the mould. You can see inside there, you can see the detail off the cylinder. The rocker gear up the top. The cooling fins on the cylinder, which I did by winding cotton around the balsa. Interesting. Okay, well we'll leave that. Here's the body, which will be photographed from an angle like this. And I'm using my construction drawing, which I just showed you there, which is a bit of an odd thing. That's the Hubert. See the cylinder sticking out there? There's his skis. He's pushing to try and free the plane. Later on, of course, during this attempt, as he tried to free the skis there by pushing and rocking, the plane took off and the tail plane hit him in the back, causing him bad injury. This was a dangerous place to be, there's no doubt about it. And here's the cylinder sticking out in front of the cowl. Here's my pencil diagram of the Vega, the Lockheed Vega. And that's the bit I'm constructing now, so it's all the bits and pieces. It's got wonderful markings on it, and it's bright orange, so it's going to be terrific. What I'm going to do now is, to be able to set them around a crankcase, I'll be drilling some holes in the back of the pistons, or the cylinders, so I can wire them into a crankcase. So each of these now has a hole drill. No, I can't do it like that. Each of these pieces now has a hole drilled in the back, ready to be fitted to the crankcase. Shame I'm not left-handed here. I've got the camera on the wrong side, of course. Good thing about this plastic is it's very hardy. I can drill into it. I can paint it without undercoating it. It's a really good thing. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'll make some con rods. Stop there. So each of these has what I'll be doing now is arranging these around the crankcase. What I do is make a sort of a false con rod and stick it in there. So you can see, you can probably just see my fingers, can you? Okay, so what I'll do is I'll pick up the cylinder, put a bit of super glue on it, okay, so what I'll do is I'll arrange the cylinders around a crankcase now. One. Just pause it. Con rod goes in the top. Can you see what I'm doing? Mm-hmm. Like that. Looks like ceramic now. And we attach this to the crankcase. So what I do is get a bit of glue, get a bit of glue along the side of the cylinder, along the bottom of the con rod. Can you still see it, Jim? Yep. Push it down so it goes onto the crankcase. Oops. Ooh. Okay, it's a 2-cylinder engine. Great. But we want a 9-cylinder engine, so we keep going. Radial engine. Doesn't look real good, does it really? But I think once we get it onto the front of the plane, like that, I think it'll be cool. Yeah, beauty. 4-cylinder radial aero engine made out of funny little plastic. Okay, here we go. What I've done is, remember I've put the pavlova on top, which is a silicon kit that comes out of the silicon kit tube. The silicon kit's ready to go now. I've squeezed this silicon out of the caulking gun over the top of my carved piece, which is the wooden bit here. I've used the cotton to create the cooling baffles on the cylinder. I've used this wire to strengthen the mould. What I'm going to try and do now is try and pick it off. See if I can't get this to come off there. So I can mould a new cylinder. hopefully, this is hard because this filler dries really quickly ordinarily, but it's so thick. Oh, there you go, it's perfect. What have I left in there? Oh, that's great. Look at that. That's really nice. Bit of cotton stuck in there. But it's good. This thing's gone crooked. It's meant to be the rocker gear on top of the engine, but that one didn't work on the other mould, so what I'll do now is it's a hard one to get at. But it's great moulding material because it's so smooth. The only trouble is I'm finding is the moulds are collapsing. By collapsing, I mean they change shape after I've done a couple of them. I think it's the heat of the resin in there. Plaster, I could use plaster, but I don't think I want plaster. Beautiful. So there we go. That's my model. It's got a strange hole in the front here though, isn't it? There's my model. And there's the thing. You can see the shape clearly, can't you? That's going to work fine. Well, we'll try that in a minute. Now, I probably didn't show you enough about the fuselage. Here's the plank of balsa wood that's created my my Lockheed Vega fuselage. That was carved out like this. See how that was cut out of there? You can probably see that shape is pretty well. And you can see the thickness of the balsa if I add my... So what I've done is, from the back you can see the wood's been carved out. So I've just sort of carved it away like that, and then I've painted it with undercoat. And now the door's got to come out. So what I've done is drawn the door on the side of the fuselage, and then I've moulded this piece of plastic just by heating it over the candle. So the candle's here. I heat it over the candle, hold it back and forth so I don't burn a hole in it. And then I pull it down sharply over the fuselage while it's still warm. You can see that's exactly the same shape as the fuselage, which is terrific. So this is going to be the fuselage door which will open up. Next thing I do is I get the knife, and this takes a great deal of patience. I carefully cut along these things. Carefully cut along there. Cut the corners round there. And then from the back, I hollow it out. So it's taken quite a while of chipping. It's the top. Taken quite a bit of chipping to get this out because I don't have the right sort of tool. What I need is a tool with a blade across the top edge. That's where the cutting edge should be, flat along that top edge. And ideally, my knife would have a curve on it like that. You know, like. So I've cut through here. I've opened the door. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to push it out. Make sure I don't pull off the... There's lots of filler and undercoat on the body at the moment. You can actually see I'm pulling it off now. This would be like a modern airliner would do it like that, but I've cut that out. Door's out, so that's going to be replaced by the other door. Now what I'm going to try and do now is set it up on a jig. I might just try mixing up a cylinder. So what I'm going to do now is I'll go back to the engine. So there's the fuselage, and it's been painted and sanded many times. You can probably see it's got a slightly coarse texture. But it's amazing. What you have to do is just put a coat of paint on. Be patient. Paint it many times. Like, it doesn't happen in one shot. You can see the pencil lines where I'm marking out the things I have to include on the fuselage. I've got a bulkhead and a plug there, and that's where the engine's going to go on. So once I've moulded the cylinders, there's the cylinder, remember that? I'll mould that with plastic, and that's what I'll show you now. And that cylinder will appear on the side of the engine. Okay, let's do that now. Now, I have my mixing palette. This is an old tile. And so what I'm doing is I've got my tin of filler here. It's 2-part filler, so it doesn't dry until I start adding the hardener, which is a real advantage. So I've got filler, that's enough, it doesn't need much. Add the hardener. Polyester filler. Caution! Keep out of reach of children. Avoid breathing vapor. Do not heat above 50 degrees C. Creates heat. The trouble is, great stuff. Trouble is, it's warping my molds. I don't know why, but it is. It just needs the slightest drop of hardener. Less than you'd think. See that pink spot? Looks like a blood spot, like an egg. Probably put too much hardener in now. So I've got my mould, I've mixed up the filler, so what I'm going to try and do now is push it right down into this, into the mould. Oh no, no, I'm not. Forgot. Every time you mould you need a release. As a release I'm using cooking oil and a brush. I'm hoping that will stop it from sticking in the mould. You call that a release. So I paint that into the mould liberally, that means lots. You could do it with plastic, you could do it with plasticine even. Might try one plasticine later to see if it works. Because by using plasticine it'd be a non-toxic mould. Toxic meaning poisonous or dangerous. So push it in, just like making jelly moulds, you know, like it'd be better with jelly because jelly is so thin. So I could make an engine that was like jelly, a jelly engine. That'd be cool. And it's rough, you know, I like this because it's kind of rough. By rough I mean I need highly polished things, otherwise the filler sticks to them, which is a real pain. It's funny the things you never think of, you know. Now the heat in there is somehow causing these moulds to go off. I don't know why. Because silicon's not necessarily, it's not sensitive to heat. It's one of its properties, or it's meant to be, so. See that? Well, you probably can't see it. This is happening constantly. I'm pulling things away from the camera. Well, that's how it ends up, of course, but anyway, just using the scraps. So I'm pushing that in there. Hope that stays there. Looks good. Okay, stop you. There's my working drawing. And what I have to do now is I'm going to construct the door. See the skid areas, that's changing slightly. This area here is going to change. So what I've done is take another piece of paper, and what I'm doing is I'm making sketch the nose. side view, which isn't quite correct. You can see it's very light. And now I'm sketching the cylinder view. This is the bit I'm putting over the top of the other one, so this bit, you don't want to lose it. That bit's going over the top of here, and that's the modification to the front of the engine, so that's the look we're going to get. So with this now, what I have is I have the fuselage. More or less like that. Get the wing going over the top. I don't know how big the background's going to be. It's going to be a bit bigger than this. You can see in the background here. There's the coast going off into the distance. The whirling propeller. We'll work that stuff out now. So I'll go back to my reference, because what I'm going to try and do now is set it up on a jig. There's another model of a Lockheed Vega. It's not the Wilkins one, but it doesn't matter. What I need to do is I need to know what the height of the undercarriage is compared to the height of the fuselage. And that way I can work out it's a bit less how high the thing's meant to stand off the ground. So what I'll do is just have a look. So the height of the fuselage to the ground is about that much. It's quite high. So I think that I'll end up, so what I'll do now is I'll end up trying to put the fuselage up into a jig. So I've got a jig now. What I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and set the plane up so that it's on the jig. And then I can rig the rest of it. I can put the wings up. I can put whatever I need up to it from there. So what I'll do is I'll get the hot glue gun and I'll mount the fuselage up. So like this. Okay, so I've got the jig up now, so I can rig the aircraft now. Wings on, wheels down. I've started carving the strut, so this strut will go out under the fuselage like that. The engine will be mounted on the front in time. Okay, here we go. So we've got, remember we had the pavlova, which is silicon kit. We pushed in the putty. So what we do now is try and get this out of here. Grab an edge, prise it out gently, and what we should have is a reproduction of our cylinder head, remember, or our cylinder. Okay, let's have a look what we get. Chipped a bit. And there we go. It's a bit crooked over the face, but it's pretty darn good. Excellent. So what we do now is we just carve away the bits that we don't want. This stuff is great. I know, look, it's a type of a plastic that's probably not very healthy for you. Once again, most of the materials we're using probably not very good for us. Use them in a well ventilated area. There's a bit of a breeze. I often do things outside if I can. So shave off the bottom. Now this is a bit tricky because this bit's got to come off without taking off. What I have to do is maintain the shape that's in there. But gee, it's good fun though. Trouble is if the mould gets damaged, every bit of damage shows in the final piece. You have to be an expert to use this stuff. If you use too much hardener, it goes all kind of pasty. It goes flaky, sort of like what? Like a sweet, like a candy. It feels like a candy. It's got that same sugary sort of texture to it. See, I've got a gap in, you can probably see here I've got a gap in the mould. See how there's surface detail. That wasn't meant to be there, but it doesn't matter as long as there's more rather than less. Look at this. Look how easy it is to carve. It's fantastic. I've just got to make sure I don't take this off. So you can actually do quite a bit of work on it. Haven't worked out the induction system yet. I really need a good drawing of a right cyclone engine. Can't believe I haven't got one. I've got a Wasp, Pratt & Whitney Wasp. Every time you research the aviation industry, the tragedy of the British aviation industry is amazing. They just had everything. They had everything. Every innovation. All the manufacturers, all the knowledge, and a really peculiar attitude with government. It's only going to be one real aircraft industry in the near future, and it'll be American. Even the Australian stuff's been bought up by the Americans. It's very, very, very tragic. Don't know what Australia's involvement's going to be, because it used to be that anyone who could afford a plane could make a mark in a way. They would either do a long distance flight or set a record with planes that were really, really, quite affordable in a sense, even women. Don't know how they're meant to do it today. Still. There we go, nice cylinder head. Now what I'm going to do is, that's going around there, what I'll do is I'll substitute one of those cylinders. Substitute that for a good look at that. Isn't that, it's so cool. Just love that. So what I'll do is, here's my exhaust manifold, bit of stretch sprue. That'll look good. The plastics are much better to use. They're more hassle, but they're much better to use, so that's that. Plane's up on the jig, as you saw, so I guess the thing to do is to try and work out where the motor's going to go. Let's take this cylinder off. I don't like this one. Those two are good. That one's fine. I don't know, I reckon that one's got to change. That one's got to go. So what I do is the motor. Looks like a big question mark, doesn't it? Or a sickle. See, I've got something to hold on to now. This is the exhaust ring. Curve's not quite right. Good enough for jazz. I think it might do it. So I take the cylinder barrel, drill a hole in the base, shot's too close, get some wire to Doesn't have to be that cool. Actually, I might even use some of the sprue, some of the scrap sprue, because I won't need all this. So I'll use some of this to stick it in. That's too good. I don't know. Maybe that bit. Okay, that'll do. Now, wish I'd discovered this stuff before. This doesn't look great at the moment, but you won't believe this when it's painted, because I can already see there's enough detail there to make it interesting already. It's going to get better when it's painted. I've had a look at a lot of paintings of engines now. I know what I need to make it work. Okay. It's wonderful stuff, that builder's bog, far out. Don't know how good it is for you, but gee, it moulds well. If I'd used plaster moulds, I think it could probably get it better. If I had time to build plaster moulds, well, I should do that, I think. The silicone kit's not really working. The plaster moulds would be great. I think I'll get much more detail. So I'll try that. If I have to make another radial engine, I'll probably end up using plaster rather than the silicone. The silicone's good, but it damages quite easily, and the plaster's resistant to heat too, which is a big advantage. It's got to be one way of looking at it. Okay. So this is the floored. You can see there are all the collapsed cylinders at the bottom. But this is how they look. The funny thing is, I was up at the War Museum. Oh, that's so cool. What a cool little engine. I just need to show you the wing, because I've actually got a bit sort of carried away here and built the whole wing. Spar and fillets. There's the centre section of the wing. I've used a plan for this one. Like if you look at this, that's the whole wing. I've filled in some of the ends, working off a plan this time. Wasn't it funny? It won't focus, it's too white. So I filled in the end in. I may stick a plank on top of there in a second. Go right back to the centre. You can see inside the wing. Wasn't it funny? It's having trouble with it. So there's the wing, which goes on top of the fuselage. Let's have a look. Best thing I can do is lift it up. Done the tailplane and rudder. If you look underneath, you can see that I've reinforced a lot of things. Created ribs and spars just to hold things straight, but it's only got to be seen from about there, so I'm not sure whether I'll even need the top of the fuselage. On the motor side, you might notice I've fitted exhausts made of wire. Sanded the door out. Let's go around the other side. So that's about the point of view, something like that. It's got that praying mantis look to it, and if you come around the other side, you notice a lot of stuff like all those middle supports will go, but that front wire is staying. That's going to, I'm going to cover that in balsa wood. The engine's insignificant from that side, but let's get some lighting on this. See how I've put the exhausts in, drilled into the cylinder heads for the right whirlwinds. So what I'll be doing now is I'll be cutting out the window. I want to show you some bits and pieces. The rudder didn't work. See that rudder, that didn't work initially. I'll show you what, I've discarded one. The way I did it was I did a trace. Oh, it's hard to see because it's tracing paper. Won't pick it up. So I made a tracing paper pattern and traced that off onto the balsa wood. That's how I've done the tailplane, but the first one didn't work. Here's the door shell that was cut out. Can you see that up here? It's the door shell that was cut out. I might use that. I've got a plastic one. Oh, I've lost it. It's around here somewhere. I've made a window on the side of the fuselage. So that's been bent to the shape of the fuselage. I think it goes that way. Same shape. That's good. Exactly the same shape. So that will become. Whoop, that will become the window. That's what I'll start on in a minute. Here's a rudder. It didn't work. A rudder and tailplane. It's that bit there. Rudder and tailplane here. See that? That was that. It was too small. Taking it off. But what I'll do to it is I'll make it a spare elevator. So from here, what I'll do is I'll reshape it, sit it on there, because I figured out from my filming angle, you actually see that you need that other point. See on the top of the fuselage, there's a subframe there. See that frame here? That's going to hold the wing. Just put that down. This subframe here will hold the wing. I'll show you. Let's put it up so that you can see it clearly. In the wing, see how there's a locating lug? There's a plank there. Let's have a look at it. So what happens is the locating lug goes into the subframe and mounts the wing onto the fuselage. So see how I've carved down into there? That fits snugly into there. And then the wing sits on top of the fuselage like that. So, and then I'll start building the cockpit. That's the shot. So I think, I don't know, somewhere under there. Something like that. So maybe I won't see the top of the fuselage. Here we go. It's a simplistic and annoying method. Basically, I've just got to carve this window out now with a knife. But what I might do is I might just drill out the corners. So what we might do is just drill out the corners. Oops. That's a start. So basically all I'm going to do now is I'm going to carve these windows out bit by bit. I hate this. There must be a better way to do it. It's so, well, no, I don't hate it. It's just so time consuming. The funny thing about doing this sort of work is you stew on things. If something bad's happened in the morning, what happens is because you're in the studio the whole day, you just think about it. Awful. Absolutely awful. It's going to be the worst thing about a studio life. Or maybe that fuels studio practice. People's emotions go with them all day. So even though you're doing something physically, your mind tends to wander at times. Oops, chip. Now what I'm missing something that I can carve things out with. So this, scoop it out this way. So you've got to turn it round. There's body filler in here, so I've got the hard body filler and the very soft balsa wood. So I'm pushing hard on the balsa, I'm pushing hard on the body filler, and then it just goes through that and digs into the balsa big time. But I need this because it's going to be one of the filming points, so it doesn't have to be too deep. But I want this window to function. I want to put the window in it. I want it to look good. Give it a good grey coating inside. Don't know what they Lockheed. I wonder what happened to Lockheed. This week has been one of those weeks when I've read about the English airline industry losing its last commercial jet project, BAE 146. By all accounts, it wasn't the best plane in the world, but it was. It's sad to think of a country that made the Supermarine Spitfire and the Lancaster, one of the world's great bombers, and Englishmen that have covered so many world records has now without a modern commercial jet project. It's amazing. Anyway, so America takes over the world pretty well. That's it. Except for Airbus. I guess Airbus is England still makes wings and assemblies for Airbus, but it's not quite the same. Always had a fraught relationship between the English private industry and the government. The government funded projects and stopped them. So I've gnawed out the hole like a beaver. I have my window glass on the correct curvature because that's moulded to the fuselage. Can you see that? So what I'll do now is I'll mark out the window. What I have to do is I have to find a colour to paint inside there. I think it'll be dark grey. So I'll quickly paint inside there and then I'll mark out the window. That looks good. Now on the top of the fuselage, you see I've placed the fillet in here that mounts, that seals the wing to the body. Peculiarity of the Vega, it's got this sort of thing that goes all the way back almost to the door or above the door. The window's in and sealed. Now what I need to do now is put the wing on top of that section. So you see what I've got here is a bay that's going to hold the wing on. So what will happen now is, if I just zoom back a bit, I'm going to be putting that wing on there. The wing will click in. Let's get under there. The wing will click in and seal on that point. Okay, so I'll do that and show you. You can see the engine in there. It's a wonderful little thing. So we have that situation there that the wing seals. And that's the start of the cockpit. That straight line you see at the end is the start of the cockpit. That's why I had to put the window in so I could get the wing on top. But I don't think you'll even see it. As I choose the angle I'm going to use, I don't think you're even going to see it. Okay, so we'll put the glue in all the places that it needs to be. And then what we'll do is we'll place the wing on. You can probably see me getting the glue in there. Now the trouble is I'll get one shot at this because once this glue grabs, it sticks. I hate that. I don't like that about it. I like everything else about it. Oh God, it clacked. I don't know what that clack is. Okay, so it's down. Let's have a look at it. This has been a big thing because it's all been about this wing. I've spent so much time building it. And so much time sanding it. Oh, gee, the struts are working. So I'll just stick that on. It's really looking like a Lockheed Vega though, which is just great. What a wonderful aircraft it is. It's beautiful. One of the most beautiful I've ever built anyway. Okay, so that's it, locked in. So the wing's locked in. I can build up a cockpit now because in here, all the support struts, I'll just do a simple one because you won't see it, I'll figure it out from my angle. But the rest of it's good, it's good. It's down, it's solid, good stuff. That's about the angle, something like that. See the engine there? It's looking good. Okay. Cool looking thing, stop it. I have here a discarded rudder. That's the rudder I'd built that didn't work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it as a tail plane. So I'll stick on the what was the rudder will now become an elevator. That's that thing that goes up and down like this. Best if I show you up close. See that? So what I'll do is I'll use the rudder as an elevator. And this will become the horizontal stabilizer on the back of the plane. So when you look across the back, you'll see this thing. All I need to do now is just work out, oh you probably can't see that very well. Just need to work out what angle and where it goes. Because I'll need it. When I look across the back of the plane, I figure it's going to be sticking out. So that's what we'll do. So I've retrimmed that rudder. So what I'll do with the rudder, and now I've made it a horizontal stabilizer. So what I'll do is I'll stick that in there, put the super glue on. I can't do it because I need two hands. I can't show you because I need two hands to do it. So what I'll do is I'll put the glue on there and then I'll stick the elevator in there. This will become the rudder, or the fin. Now it becomes an elevator. I'll only glue it in one or two places because I want to be able to adjust it. The trouble is with this glue, it's great, but it just, once it's stuck, it's stuck. One touch. Which is funny because I can't adjust things. I'm used to being able to adjust things. Okay, so that's going to go in there. I've got the glue on that. Now remember, I hadn't planned on needing this because when I viewed it, it just didn't seem I was going to see it. But now that I have, what I'll do is I'll retrim the rudder. I've done the fin now, made the fin the horizontal stabiliser. Now what I need to do is just reshape the rudder. Oh. Can't humiliate him. It's got the same profile, so it should work. Rick. I've put a little bit of I've dropped the elevators a bit because I figure if he's gunning that engine, he wants that tail down while he sorts himself out. So let's put a bit of glue along there. Okay, here's the critical glue. I would never ever recommend this glue to anybody who hasn't done any modelling, because it's just fraught with disaster. It sticks. Once it sticks, it sticks. It sticks to your fingers rather than the wood. It does everything wrong, but the thing is, it sticks, and it sticks really, really well. It makes it just like, makes two things one. Sometimes when you glue two parts together, they just become one, or they feel like they're one. It's just amazing stuff. See, so with the elevator now, I can turn that around and see, even though it's not correct, what you get is you just get that hint of that other tab around there. It's not much, is it? Yeah, but that's all I needed. So that's because I was on that 3/4 angle. That's what we'll see. Barely any of it really. Okay. Okay, this is the progress on the Vega. I've started building up the cockpit, as you can see, using wire for the frames. You might be able to see right in there, there's a wire, and gluing acetate on the top. Those two pieces of wire sticking out there, they're for climbing up to the engine and filling the oil tank up the top. I've put the first of the skids on, and I've started filling those. They're ready to go. The engine's flat at the back because I'm not going to see that, so all I've done is moulded the front faces, as we probably talked about before. The float's been glued to the ground. There's a steel frame, there's a wire frame inside there. Surface, you can see the wood starting to fill it with the body filler. So pretty well get the impression, but it's looking really good, isn't it? I've filled in some holes on the wings here. I'm going right in here because I want to show you something. Now just let me show you this float. These floats are made up in two halves. So what you do is, I trace the outline of the float, I streamline it from the top and from the front and the back. I make the bottom flat so that it can be stuck to the ground, and here's the hole for the wire. So what happens is, I'll stick the other side of the float on here. The wire goes in between here in this lead hole here. Then I'll stick the other side of the float on the other side. Okay, that's pretty good. So there's the float that's attached here. Here's the new float. It's been shaped on one side. there's a section being hollowed out so that the strut can go on top of it. So that slips in there and the strut captures in there, and that gets glued to the ground, and then I'll put the other side of the strut on the other side and smooth it into the shape, which is great. It also makes the aircraft stand solidly on the ground, because you can see here, by gluing it down it gives the plane weight. You don't want it sort of floating. I'll glue that down, that'll become part of the baseboard. So there you go, cabin's totally formed. Just got to put a few more panels in there, and I'll put a pilot silhouette in there because in case you capture a glimpse of it. So that's the Vega. Okay, so we've got the support struts in under the floats, and I've started fitting the skis. The skis fit underneath the floats. I've started marking out the words on the side of the fuselage, and I've done the thickening up around the door frames. We've got both floats in. I've modified the tail, and we're just about ready to start using the figure. Exhaust pipes fitted underneath the engine. It's looking really good. The struts were a pig to fit, but still, look good. Floats look good. Starting to get there. You can see that thicker paint around the door. I'll just keep building that up, and then I'll pull the tape away, and that'll be like the door reinforcement. And then what we'll do is we'll finish the bulkheads inside the plane and go from there. Added the extra cabin detail. You can see the flash off the glass. There you go, cabin details done. Started painting the cylinders. Done Hubert Wilkins. Started marking out the markings on the side. I love that phase where you're actually getting into painting the stuff. And the doors going there is going to be through the hatch. Look how good Sir Hubert looks pushing at that plane. Built up the base. Check out Sir Hubert there. And we've painted the exhaust. Exhausts are fitted. We've got the propeller. So that's what we'll be doing now. We'll be painting the engine. That door's gone on there because I think I'm going to have to make the hatch up the back. So that's pretty flash. Okay, it's ready to go. You see him struggling away with the plane there. I don't know what angle I'm going to get on this. It's going to be something like this. I want a bit of the cabin. Now with the figure you can see that you've got a balsa wood base. The armature's been pushed up through the balsa wood, and that forms the frame of the figure. You can barely see it. You might see in that in the armpit there. You can see the wire that pushes up through this bit here. See my thumb, ahead of my thumb? The head is roughly sculpted, not really at all. He's all made out of filler, fine filler. But he's got real good posture about him, good arms. Got a real push about him, I like that. So he goes down against the plane. The front won't matter that much, you can see it on the legs. The legs aren't that terrific. There's no arm on this side, no hand. We may go for the hand, but the sleeve's fantastic. That'll paint up so well. So he's ready to go, and he stands really well too. He's got good weight. Yeah, I'm proud of him. That's good. The other thing, apart from the it's hard to get the angle. The angle's got to be low like this. So this one might have to go. It's too high. I wanted fairly high sort of angle, but it might be too high. So I might have to get rid of some of that stuff. That's a good shot. So I mightn't get the cockpit in after all. It's quite nice, that one. That might be the shot. No cabin, either that or I have to pull the level of the snow and stuff down to about there. No, it's too high. This is a better angle. That one's not bad. I've put the door in to seal off that bulkhead because it seems because of the fuel tanks in the centre of the thing, Wilkins had to get in through a top hatch. So I've shaped a top hatch by putting a balsa wood plug in there. See that? It's not a whole piece. I've just added enough balsa wood so that I could put in that small hatch. So the hatch has been included. The engine's been painted completely. Now what I'm going to do is the struts and floats. And this door's been sealed. Doesn't look it, but I'm sure it'll be fine. So I'll do the struts. The whole undercarriage is black, which is kind of handy. So So what I'm going to do is lay down a good coat of paint because I want to put highlights on it, which means a slightly lighter colour. So I've added some varnish to the black and thinned it out a bit. Looks oily, kind of nice. She had a lot of trouble with the engine, with the sanding. Anyway. So what I'll do is I'll paint the whole undercarriage. So just getting the last bits of the struts painted. Getting around those edges is very difficult because there's so many different angles. You've got to make sure you get them all. They look a bit sort of dense. I think I might have to highlight them on some of the shots. But it's getting there. Making sure that all those bits are black. They look good. Now what I'll do is I'll do the floats, these things here. I might just wash some black over the skis. I think these will have to change colour. I think they're going to be a bluey black. Very watery. So those things are going to be black too. Good thing about them is they're so flexible. They're like real skis. I can actually bend them down to paint, which is good. That's pretty good. It's starting to really look it, isn't it? Starting to really like it. So we'll do that now. So I'll paint the floats. They're kind of a brown colour, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple of washes so that you can see the white through. I'm hoping to retain some of the feeling of the white. Looks much better. It seems to go with the look of the float much more. So it's kind of washed out mixture of ochre and a dark brown. And I've used a lot of water to get the paint to kind of float. The only trouble is it'll show up any inconsistencies in the preparation because it's such a watercolour effect. I hope to put a wash of reddy brown over it too. So kind of washing that colour on there. It's a bit funny, but the brush is good. So I check my reference. Get a look at my mixes. I've got a couple of colours here. Whoops, bad shot. So I'll use a pink, which is like magenta, and a bright yellow. And I'll mix up that sort of orange. Mix that on the palette. It's going to take a couple of layers of paint, so just mix it up. Mix a good lot of it up. Bit of water. So I mix the pink and the yellow together and get a sort of a bright orange, mostly yellow really, more than pink. There you go. My wife Lou was just saying it looks like an egg yolk colour. Well, it paints like an egg yolk. It's just horrible. It's really slithery, horrible paint. So I'm going to have to put a couple of coats on it, which is a shame. But we'll just go with it. Whoops, sorry, not even seeing that, eh? We'll just go with this. It's just so slippery. It's a horrible texture. The brush is nice and soft, but I don't know. But orange it's got to be, so... The trouble is you have to paint it so quickly because it dries while you're painting. It just dries on the brush. Funny looking thing, isn't it? Good. A quick summary shows the application of markings. I'm about to start the next lot, so what you can see is they're hand painted with a very small fine brush. I guess it's like it was a number 1 brush, but a couple of the hairs have actually fallen out, so it's kind of like an O or a double O brush. I start the markings by sketching things out with pencil using the reference. You can see with the X3903 the pencil's smudged underneath, unfortunately. I'll have to work on that. And then what I do is I put the black stuff, the black paint on, the black lettering very finely, and I add a bit of varnish with it so it's so those pencil lines won't go, but I'm not sure I'm going to worry about them because it's actually, I don't know, look, I quite like that hand painted finish, which is what you don't get with markings, aircraft markings. See, it's not quite right. I quite like that. Because even the best sign writers, it gives it sort of a feeling of life. See how it's kind of inconsistent? I kind of like it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do that tail fin, finish the Lockheed lettering. What a magnificent plane. There's a tail fin text. It's probably a bit rough, isn't it? You can probably see that that's a bit rough. But I'm going to leave that because I quite like that sort of, I don't know. So I've marked out the Pennzoil sign in pencil on top of the fuselage here. The next thing I'm going to do is this bit here. You can probably see it makes a bit more sense over here. We'll be doing the Pennzoil markings here. So Wilkins was ahead of his time in seeking sponsorship for these ventures, which would have been extremely expensive. So I've started marking things out in pencil. I'll put that. So I've done the markings on the tail. You can probably see the varnish on the fuselage there. Finish those markings. Towards the front of the plane. We have the fuel leaking out of the cylinders. A bit of oil staining on the front of the cowling. And I've put the propeller in. Now if we just turn this around, can see the propeller blades being picked up there. So it's starting to look good, isn't it? And put a wingtip on it because I found doesn't matter what angle I took it from, I couldn't get it without that wingtip in there. So the plane's going to wingtip here. Skis, and I've pulled the support out right around the side of the fuselage. There originally was a support here. You can see the mark underneath the cowl, and I've added that piece of fuselage so that I could get the hatch in because it didn't have a door, it had a hatch. So I've had to modify that, but that's looking quite good. Propeller blades, let's see if I can get those propeller blades to shine up. Yeah, it's looking good. Tail markings. Now I've recorded the figure. They used Eskimo type clothing, Wilkins, which was part of his success in these long ventures. And I've used as much reference. They were top of an oilskin on the pants, and he had a striped garment on the top. So you can see from that angle it looks really quite real. What I'll be doing is I'll be brushing some frost on top of that now. But the attitude's good, and the man's good. Could be any size, I guess, couldn't he? But that's him struggling with the weight of the plane. You can see him setting his weight there. But he doesn't have a face because you won't see it. You'll see this 3/4 attitude here. If you look right down up close, the good thing about this is, can you see that it's not one colour? It's a base white, but I've brushed shadows into it. You can see in the folds of the clothes there. I've brushed a sort of a blue-brown in there. It's a scale thing. I think those shadows need to be deep. And he'll be set up against the side of the fuselage of the plane. So there we are, there's Hubert Wilkins, and look at this, he's completely not finished on this angle. You can see the pieces of plaster there where I've not had to carve, and I've left his arm off here. His face isn't properly defined, but it looks fine from that angle where he's going to be seen from about there. Close fitting skull cap, must have been fur lined to keep them nice and warm. Wilkins was trapped in the cold many times and managed to survive because of his knowledge of the cold conditions. There we go. So if I put those things together, let's just notch him under there. So quite a lot's happened in the meantime. Wilkins will eventually be pushing up against this fuselage, so he'll be struggling with that aircraft like that. You can see him trying to push that thing free. Yeah, it's lovely. That's a good angle. I hadn't thought of that one. The wingtip coming straight out of there. It's good. Guess I don't need the whole thing. I'll come out a bit. That's good. Figure in here to give you a sense of scale. But here's Wilkins trudging through the snow, I guess. But that's where the plane will appear. And this is the backdrop. Now let's have a look. If we drop down below, we'll leave Wilkins there for a sense of scale. What I've done is I've made a curved backdrop like a television studio. So if I hold this up, that's probably the best way to show you. Now see that the background has a slight curve in it. Oh, there he is, he's fallen over in the snow. And from the top, the backdrop curves right round like that. And what will happen is the plane will appear in there. You can see it from there, but you can't see it from the front. So it's very similar to what would happen on a television set or a film set. Let's go around the back because that's what we're allowed to do in this. Let's walk around the back, and what you can see is, you can see the framework. and how the thing's been made. And I've used wooden formers to get the curve of the backdrop. See how I've used wood cut into shape there, and that curves that background. So they're like formers, very much like an aircraft construction, I guess. So, and I've plastered a curve up. Can you see how I've used foam core board to get the angle there, and then use that to shape the curve, which is great because you can't quite see it, which is good from this angle. And I've had to join a couple of pieces of wood, so if we cruise over the top, what you notice is two of these pieces of wood have been, or two of these pieces of backboard have been joined together all the way down. And that's been plastered from the front, which is great because from this camera shot you can't see what's happening actually, which is terrific. So you can see that the construction underneath, the light framework. But I wanted that angled foreground. That looks great. They look like sheets of ice. Well, that's what we'll be doing now. We'll render the background. Okay, now the idea is to try and get some of the shadows up on these snow banks. So what I'll be doing is I'll be moving colour in, trying to give it a sharp edge for a shadow, and then washing it down the snow. Successively adding darker, merging darker blues in there to try and get a good shadow tone. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm rendering the backdrop with the clouds. Lots of mist, so that means using lots of white and lots of water. And you can see the set now. What I need to do is wait for daylight now. There's the set, you can see the curve over the top. These colours are too stark, this isn't working. But the background's working quite well up here. The sweep of the clouds is working really nicely. Now what happens? What I'm trying to do is, I've got reference here for the foreground. And you can see that that's not being lit properly at the moment. I've got to get that curve to drop out, so I need a diffuser. But if I put that angle up there, so the plane locks into there, and it's absolutely like a film set. I love that about it. That's maybe the angle. It's hard. I have to push that snow down. But gee, it's starting to look like a real thing. That's a nice shot, except for the wingtip. That's lovely. I might have to render the front of this stuff down. And I'm going to be putting some mist over the top of the plane. So, and here's Wilkins pushing to try and get that plane free of the ice. See him down there? Isn't that lovely? engine whirring away. What I'm going to be doing now is I'll actually be painting the mist up over the plane slowly. I'll see if I can cloud it up a bit. Might even paint out some of that wingtip on the other side, but that's looking really, really good. So that's where we're at the moment.